All right, Mumi, what are we doing here? What are we talking about today? Because I just got done listening to the audiobook version of I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And let me tell you, that was really depressing.
Hey, I got just the thing that'll lift your spirits.
What the f*** is wrong with you, you f***ing idiot? Jesus Christ.
Makoto Fukamachi is just your average sports journalist aiming for the top. Joji Habu is a man with nothing to lose, putting it all on the line for his dreams, but just barely hanging on. But when these two cross paths, they're set on a collision course toward Mount Everest? Will they be able to reach the apex? Or do they just have their heads in the clouds? Climb on up and take a peek for yourself in Summit of the Gods. So yeah, what did you think about this uplifting heroic tale?
I thought that this was a great movie that no one will talk about because it's not Arcane. It's like, Jesus Christ, Netflix. I don't know, maybe like plan stuff out better to like avoid this, you know, maybe don't put out like this movie on Netflix like right around the same time as Arcane.
Just fucking eclipsed.
Yeah, it's like, you know, oh, this is like a great piece of art, but no one's gonna talk about it.
I feel like that kind of just encapsulates the mangaka's like entire library.
Oh.
Because like Jiro Taniguchi, in the West, in a general broad sense, he's very like underrated. He does have like this weird like niche cult appeal almost in like a lot of European countries.
Mm-hmm.
One of his works, A Distant Neighborhood, already has a live action movie adaptation. I believe it was French.
Well, I know Summit of the Gods also has like a Japanese like live action adaptation.
Yeah, it's funny because this isn't even like the first adaptation.
No, well, yeah, there's like a whole like media franchise here because it started as a novel.
Yeah, it's a book, and then it was a manga adaptation. Then it was adapted into 2 movies.
Yeah, a Japanese live action movie, and then a French animated movie. And we're of course talking about the French animated movie, which is the only one I've seen. You've read the manga.
I've read the manga.
I have not.
Yeah.
So that's going to like characterize, I guess, our different perspectives.
We probably have quite a bit of a different experience. Yours is probably going to be more reflective of the majority of people who are watching this.
Yeah, you're just like average person just going through Netflix and like, I don't know what the fuck is this.
My perspective will just be of what you're missing.
Yeah. I have not read the manga, but I have like seen like pages and panels from it, and the manga looks absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a style that can't really be replicated in animation either, so
No.
the movie doesn't try to really do that.
No, like Jiro Taniguchi's like style is very distinct.
Yeah.
And this just goes the complete opposite direction, doesn't even try to like encapsulate that look. But I think they do succeed in kind of capturing the scale and like the majesty of just the mountains.
Oh, 100%, yeah. That's like one of the things with this movie is that like the environments, the scenery are like a character unto itself, basically.
Yeah.
You just have like all of these really like wide environmental shots, and you're just drinking in the scenery and, you know, these gorgeous backgrounds.
Makes everyone feel very small.
Yeah. You like zoom out so much, and there's like these like tiny specks on your screen, and you just get this like almost incomprehensible scope and size of these like mountains that they're climbing.
Yeah, like this is an adaptation. It's pretty much every change that they made, with like a few exceptions, I can immediately kind of recognize like, okay, this was changed because it streamlined it, or this was cut because it just was kind of superfluous. You can accomplish the same thing without having to go down that whole rabbit hole that they go through.
Yeah. Watching the movie, this wasn't like something like a silent voice where I can kind of see like, okay, this had to be tweaked, or this was cut out, or like they cut this character's arc short, or just kind of like removed it in a weird way. This didn't really have that, where it feels very tightly structured and written, and the movie itself is only 90 minutes, but what's interesting about it is that it simultaneously feels longer than 90 minutes, but at the same time just flies by.
Well, what's funny about that is like the manga is only 5 volumes, but it feels like it takes so long to read them because it's so like dense, because it's all internal monologues, and so it's just so like dense with text that even though it's like 5 volumes, it's not like reading 5 volumes of One Piece or Naruto. Like it takes you like hours to get through.
It's like reading a regular book. But the movie, and this kind of, I think this has to do with like the structure of the movie, is that the first like 45 or so minutes are dedicated to the main character Fukumachi doing research on Habu's backstory and, you know, trying to like track him down and stuff. That's like your first like 45 minutes, and it covers a lot. And then the second like 45 minutes, the second half of this movie is just Fukumachi and Habu climbing Mount Everest together. So when you set it up like that, the whole back half is just this like one singular event.
You know what's interesting about that is like the first half of this movie only covers the first volume and like the first chapter of the second volume.
What the fuck?
And then the whole last half of the movie only covers like the 4th volume and like a chapter or 2 of the 5th volume.
Oh my god.
There's quite a bit that's just completely cut out, which I think that's kind of what you have to do with like a movie adaptation.
Of course.
Because like what you said with A Silent Voice, like they couldn't really commit to cutting things, and then you just kind of don't please anybody because you tried pleasing everyone.
Yeah, Silent Voice is kind of like, well, this should have either been 30 minutes shorter or a 12-episode TV series.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing about this is like the director just kind of was thrown this.
Yeah,
I think he was doing like reference art for the movie, and they were like, hey, we need a director. You want to be the director? So he just was like thrown it, like it wasn't a scenario where like he was like, oh, I really loved the manga and I just wanted to adapt it where people could no, this is just like, oh, hey, need you to make this. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think he had that kind of like reverence that you might have if you were adapting as a passion project. So he was kind of able to...
He's able to like look at it a bit more like objectively.
Yeah. Obviously there is a lot of story beats that are removed, but there's a lot of nuances kind of lost as a result. Like, I guess kind of getting into it. So the main difference, I guess, in like the movie and the manga is the manga is more of like a mystery kind of story. They don't know whether Mallory ever made it to the top. And so climbing enthusiasts everywhere would love to know this mystery. And as a journalist, obviously, you can make big money uncovering this scoop. He starts off with like this deep fascination about Mallory's camera. And so he's researching Habu to find the camera because he runs off and he can't find him. And so he's researching Habu, and in his research of Habu's life, he becomes really fascinated with Habu as a person. He becomes like this like legend in Fukumachi's mind because he's like learning about this guy, and he's so like fascinated in his mindset because it's kind of parallel to his own and how driven he is to like uncover the truth. And so you kind of get this like parallel where, you know, he's trying to find the truth and Habu's trying to like climb the mountain, and it kind of their drive and like obsession kind of intersects in a way where they are able to like respect each other. I don't know how much that kind of comes across in the movie. I think the movie kind of focuses more on like the thrill aspect, and that's definitely there where it's like, you know, the thrill of finding the truth, but I feel like it just completely loses that kind of mystery, like uncovering the truth kind of aspect in favor of just the core theme of the thrill.
One of the things that I was thinking about is, I guess, like the sort of like objectivity of journalism as well, because Fukumachi is like learning about Habu through like all of these like secondhand sources, and the way it's presented is like, oh, this is just like how it actually happened, one for one, and there's no like subjectivity or like bias in how they're portraying Habu. That wasn't really something, I don't know, is that expanded on more in the manga?
I would say it was. That shift in focus does, like I said, it does remove a lot of the nuance, right?
So I believe that you're talking about the scene where Habu and this kid are climbing up like the side of this cliff.
Yes.
And basically kid gets into an accident and Habu is like faced with like this situation where he needs to cut the rope, otherwise his life will also be in jeopardy.
Yeah, so in the manga, nobody knows if Habu cut the rope. How it's presented is he's in the bar or whatever and they're talking about, would you cut the rope? And he's like, I would do it.
Yeah, and the kid is hearing that and is like, oh, that's so cool.
Well, when it actually happens, everyone just assumes he cut the rope.
Yeah.
Fukamachi is kind of piecing together Habu's character profile, I guess. Like, he has just been told through these stories about all these things he's done and all these larger in life kind of things he said and all this.
Like a weird sort of like folk hero.
Right. And so he's kind of like, did he cut the rope? Did he not cut the rope? And it's kind of got this balancing act. And then that's not revealed until much later on, where they're actually on the mountain and they have like this kind of moment where they're confronting their mortality, and he reveals, he cut the rope. I wasn't able to do it. Like, you see how Habu is like very much human, even though he says these things and he knows what he has to do logically to be able to achieve his goals. He's being held back by his humanity from like accomplishing this Herculean effort. And ultimately in the story, we see that his humanity and like going back and saving Fukamachi is ultimately what leads to him failing in accomplishing his dream, at least coming back from the mountain.
Yeah.
It loses that nuance because like you don't get the full scope of like Habu's characterization in this, where in this he's just like a hobo that lives in a shack.
Listen, Mumi, he's got like the depression beard that like every character like this has.
He's been so focused on climbing Mount Everest for 8 years he couldn't even bother to shave. God. But no, in the manga, like, you see, like, that him climbing Everest is, like, entrenched into his life, where he, like, builds a whole life around just him preparing to climb Everest. Like, he has a wife and a kid.
Like out there in Nepal?
Yeah, like, so the guy who goes, like, is their base camp guy, he has much more characterization in the manga, where Habu is, like, part of his family, essentially, and, like, marries his daughter and, like, has a kid. And, like, you go from that contrast of just these stories of him got this conflicting character where he's built a life and he's still willing to go and throw everything away to achieve his goals. You lose like that nuance in the movie where he's just, a hobo.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, if you can't like include that much depth, don't even like show his family. He doesn't have a family. That doesn't exist. That guy he's like working with, he's just like a friend. And there you go. Perfect.
There were some other things that kind of bothered me about this adaptation. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think it played into the motif of it being like, quote unquote, Summit of the Gods, right? When it's saying that Summit of the Gods, you kind of think of like a heavenly thing, right?
Well, I know Mount Everest, a lot of these mountains in the Himalayas have like a deity associated with them. Mount Everest included. The name of said deity will now be put up on screen. I'm not going to try to pronounce it.
But, like, that also kind of invokes, like, the afterlife, like...
Yeah.
In the manga, there's a big motif about, like, seeing the dead as you're climbing these mountains and like and it's kind of like poetic in a way that as they're reaching like the land of the gods, quote unquote, that they're seeing like the dead kind of reach to them, like they're kind of on that boundary of like life and death, like in a literal and kind of metaphysical sense. And that's kind of not really leaned into much in this movie.
You get it a bit towards the end of the movie.
Just the imagery of like the dead kind of like provoking you or like beckoning you. It made more sense when you're talking about like Everest, where obviously all these dead bodies are just left there and they're having to walk amongst them.
Yeah. And the bodies, at that altitude and at that temperature, the bodies don't decompose. They're just kind of preserved up there as well.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into like the ending a bit, because the ending in the manga focuses more on like his need for the truth, like torturing him, like actively torturing him, where he's trying to move on. He's like trying to live a normal life. And he's just like, I have to know what actually happened. Like, I have to go and climb Everest just to learn the truth. And in climbing Everest, he's finally able to like understand why Habu did what he did. And in that understanding, he finds the truth, which is like kind of literally culminated in the whole camera plot where he finds the film and sees the picture of Mallory on top of the mountain. Like there's a lot of things that are kind of lost.
Which, again, you have to like condense this into like a feature-length film.
Yeah, it's completely understandable. Like, kind of what you just have to do. Like, you just gotta be like, murder your darlings and cut everything. I guess despite of how like negative I'm probably coming across and like criticizing the movie, I really do think it like captures the experience of reading the manga about as well as you could hope. But no, this movie is really good. Like, if you can't read the manga, you could watch this as an alternative. Obviously, I would recommend the manga and the movie.
Yeah.
But I understand not everyone's into manga. Really, if you don't want to go out, because like I had to buy the manga, right? Like it wasn't available anywhere.
I know there are scans online.
Now there is.
They're not good scans, from what I understand.
No.
And we don't encourage piracy. Go buy the manga and watch this movie on Netflix. Or is there a physical release?
Jiro Taniguchi's dead. You're not supporting him. Like.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Go ahead. Death of the author.
Death of the author.
That's how that works, right?